We all doing all right this morning? It's beautiful out there. You're all here on a holiday weekend. Look at that. God's going to answer an extra prayer for you all. I promise that. No, I'm just kidding. Don't quote me on that one. Right on. Well, hey, glad that you guys are here. If you have a bulletin, please pull that out. We're going to be using that today. And hey, if I have not had a chance to meet you yet, my name is Scott, and I'm one of the pastors here. And I'm excited about this morning. And so can you guys hear me? We're having some technical issues this morning. So I'm on, George.
You're on?
Come on, man. I can be loud if I need to also. But hey, George, just give it up for our tech people. Bugs and all of that different thing. We've had some many issues this morning, technologically and just with life. You know how that is, right? So that means that my wife told me that something good is going to happen today. Yes. So we're excited for whatever that might mean. And hey, while he's doing this, George, can I just tell you that George and Anna are two of the most wonderful people I have ever met. They serve so incredibly well. So thank you guys for what you guys do each and every week for us here at Open Arms. But while they're kind of working that out, when you guys leave today, we actually created some cards. And I'm calling these vision cards, right? They're nice little postcard material. So as you leave today, though directly behind our tech booth out in the lobby area, there's a bunch of these cards. Because here's the thing, I want you to take this home and put it someplace that you will see it all the stinking time. Because I never want any of us to ever forget why it is that we exist, why we do what we do. So on the top you'll see that it says it's showing people who God is and who He can be to them, and also just the fact that we are here for Scottsdale. So please grab a bunch of these because again, as you are out doing your thing on a weekly basis, I just think it's cool to be constantly reminded of why this church exists in this position, in this area, in the community that it does. So grab these for yourself if you want to take someone to work, whatever you want to do, but do it up. Also, a couple more things. This is literally on my notes, so it works out perfectly that we have a stagehand up here. George can do a dance pretty soon, I hope. But here's the thing, right? So inside your bulletin as well, you will also see that we are partnering with Navajo Elementary School for their Fall Festival on October 27th, the Thursday night. We're going to talk about what that looks like for you guys as volunteers, but also, if you can't volunteer, you can help. And so we're just simply collecting like individually wrapped candy to be able to bring over there. So as you're shopping, grab a couple of extra bags, bring that with you. We have a huge kind of bin in the back that we're collecting that. If you bring some that are not individually wrapped, that's okay. I will personally consume all of those. So I prefer sour candy, gummies potentially. So just going to go ahead and throw that out there. But hey, we're going to get going. And can you all hear me? I can be loud. Like I said, I have no problem with that. I got kids. I get it. I have no problem screaming and doing my thing. There we go. You need to be loud. I can be loud. Let's do it. All right. So here's the thing. All right, this morning, we're going to kind of in another standalone, if you will, next week we're launching a brand new series called Fearless, and you do not want to miss that. I am incredibly excited for those next 3 weeks. But today we are here, and I'm super excited about today because I firmly believe that God has a word for you in whatever season you currently find yourself in today. And so if you have a Bible, go ahead and grab that, pull that out along with your bulletins. There are Bibles underneath the chairs in front of you. You guys can use those as well. But here's the thing, right? As you guys are kind of getting ready for that, I don't want to claim to know too much about you, but I do feel like I know one thing. And it's true for every single one of us, and that's just this simple truth, is that every single one of us, we are drawn to the heroic. Am I right? I mean, we are just drawn to the heroic. It's why if you go to really any store, you will see costumes of superheroes lining the shelves. It's why the movie industry makes billions of dollars on their superhero franchises all the stinking time. It's why you can find Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, whatever in the world you might have, right? You can find those symbols on really just about anything you can bring up. Anything that comes to mind, you can find their symbol on it. I mean, we are drawn to the heroic. And I firmly believe that the reason that we're so drawn to that is because they exceed us. Heroes just seem to exceed whatever we see as our own natural ability. They're not, and really when you think about it, they only seem to exist in the comic books. They only seem to exist on the movie screens, and maybe even as far as our imagination allows. But here's also what I believe. I believe that you and I as people, we are so drawn to the heroic because we all have this voice in the back of our mind that seems to scream out to every single one of us that the heroic is reserved for everyone but you. That's what we believe. We believe that the heroic is reserved for everyone but you. I mean, we've all heard it, but this morning, my goal, this morning, my desire, my hope is to silence that voice. Church, quite honestly, I hope that you walk out of this place this morning with you finding the permission to believe that God wants to use you. I want you to walk out of here confident and believing that truth today. So we're going to jump right on in with one of our own biblical heroes this morning. Let me hash this guy out for you guys real quickly. What you have to know about this guy that we're going to talk about today is that this guy was a nobody that no one knew, that no one really cared about, from nowhere special. And what we're going to find out is that his brothers, they had all the talent. His brothers were the ones that people noticed. His brothers were the ones that people recognized. But to really everyone else, the guy that we're going to talk about today was just average at best. Now, of course, you don't have to raise your hands, but think of it this way. How many of you ever felt that way before? Just average. Just typical, just ordinary, just run-of-the-mill, maybe a little overlooked, maybe not quite good enough. That's what we're going to find out, is that that's exactly how this 18-year-old kid felt. But what's crazy is that although he was pretty unimpressive overall to everyone else, what we're going to find out is that God could actually see inside of this 18-year-old and take notice of what nobody else could. And what's even more interesting, that little did this teenager, little did he know that he would soon face a battle that would forever change how people viewed him. I mean, he was about to step into a role that no one could ever see coming. So today we're talking about a guy named David. Now, a lot of you here today, maybe you know a little something about David. If you don't, that's okay. We're going to hash him out just a little bit. But maybe you know that David at some point became king of Israel. Maybe you also know that David was the guy who took down the giant Goliath. Maybe you also kind of relate David to different interactions with Bathsheba, a woman who was not his wife. But what we have to know about David is that all of those things that we tend to kind of hone in on him on, a lot of things that we kind of seem to couple David with, that's not how he started out. And this morning, we're just going to focus on one very simple aspect of David's life. The start of it all, well before the crown. I mean, we're talking about David before he killed Goliath. We're talking about David before his debacle with Bathsheba. We're talking about David before he died, being known as a man after God's own heart. Because what you have to know about this guy is that he was a raggedy, harp-playing shepherd boy. Think about this. All day long. 24 hours a day almost. 7 days a week. All he did all day long was watch sheep. I mean, can you imagine how absolutely awful that would be? I mean, just think about that for a second. Just to sit all day long and watch sheep. Some of you think that you have a terribly boring job, right? Like, get some of this. This is so crazy. So I'm going to assume that a lot of us here, we don't know a whole lot about sheep. I didn't until this week when I decided to do some research on sheep. And so I wanted to share with you guys some of my findings on sheep today. You're welcome, all right? You all take these things down because this is some interesting things that will only further my case. You ready for this? Just 3 things, right? Here's what I found out. This is the internet, so it's 100% true, okay? So this is what we find out, is that sheep cannot get onto their feet if they're on their backs, right? They can't flip themselves over. I don't know why they have to be helped up. I don't get that. It's like, you're not a turtle, like, learn to flip over, whatever. But that's this kind of sheep, okay? They fall on their back there, just done for, apparently, right? Next one. Sheep do not have teeth in their upper front jaw. So like in the animal kingdom, like they're the hillbillies of the animal kingdom, right? They have no front teeth at all. And yet this is the worst of them all. Sheep have the average respiration rate, meaning like breaths per minute. All right? The average respiration rate is 16. 1-6. All right? So on top of all of these previous things, sheep are like the awkward, slow, loud breathers of the animal kingdom. And nobody likes a loud breather. Can I get an amen? Right? That's just what it is. So that's sheep, ladies and gentlemen. So that's all David did. All day long, he would just watch sheep. Now, I don't know what you would define as glamorous, but that's not what I would define as glamorous. And if you're living back then, and you're friends with David, you know exactly what you're getting for Christmas. You know exactly what you're getting for your birthday, Rosh Hashanah, all those different things are thrown in there. You're getting a wool sweater because you've got tons of them already. And what's crazy is that David doesn't realize that God is using the repetition of a boring daily routine to train him. Because what we'll actually read is that on several different occasions, there would be bears or lions, or I don't know what roamed the area back then, dragons, right? I mean, they would like attack the flocks that David was tending to. And so his job as the shepherd was to protect the sheep. And so anytime any wild animal went and tried to claim a sheep as their own, he had to fight them off with what he had. And what he had was like a slingshot, like Dennis the Menace style, right? Like a slingshot. He had some rocks and like a big stick, shepherd's staff. Like that's all that he had. But what's crazy is that ultimately fighting off these mountain lions, fighting off these bears, it would prepare David for one of the most epic battles in all of history. I mean, this is some like Mr. Miyagi stuff going on right here. But now, think about this. Let's bring this home just for a second, right? Like how often, really, think about this for yourself. How often do you and I, out loud or even to ourselves, how often do we just complain about routines? I mean, think about this. The repetition for you of waking up, going to work, maybe you go to school, you take care of the kids, you're running errands, you're attempting to maybe spend time with God if you have a chance, you're attempting to live life, you're attempting to grab a meal, you're attempting to do all these different things. Just the typical run-of-the-mill day. But I think that a lot of times what we don't realize is that God often trains the world-changing heroes far away from the spotlight. God often trains the world-changing heroes away from the crowd where nobody is really able to see them being faithful in these seemingly small things. And so for our boy David, the routine of watching sheep day in and day out is about to change. So if you have your Bibles, go up to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel's in the Old Testament. Just a few chapters in. 1 Samuel 16 is where we're going to kind of set up shop today. We'll get there in just a moment. But let me kind of get us to the point that we're going to arrive at today. So David, what we're going to find out is that David woke up one morning, literally like every other morning. It was a typical day and a typical life and a typical week of this 18-year-old shepherd boy. Chances are the sun was just coming up over the hills of Moab, and David got ready and he walked towards the fields where his sheep were. Maybe his feet were walking, where we're getting wet through the dew on the grass as he took the exact same route that he took every single time. And imagine this, right? The exact same time that David is up preparing for work, preparing to go do what he normally does, hundreds of miles away, this prophet named Samuel had just woken up as well. And Samuel had just woken up because he received, quite honestly, this really disturbing message from God. And what we find out is that God had just told Samuel that Samuel is the one to go find the new king of Israel. The king back then, Saul, he just wasn't cutting it. And so basically we're going to find out is that God wanted Samuel to go on this journey to find this new king. Take a look, 1 Samuel 16. Verse 1, it says this, "The Lord said to Samuel, 'Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king.'" That was it. I mean, that's literally all the information that this Samuel guy had. All he knew was that he was going to some guy Jesse's house in some place called Bethlehem, and God was going to lead him on his journey, right? Siri didn't exist back then. He had nowhere to go other than like the sun, I guess, in the daytime was like guiding him, and the stars and stuff like that, right? But Samuel, this old prophet, he gathered his things together and he prepares for a journey to the other side of the country to anoint the new king of Israel. Back in Samuel 16, this time we're going to be in 6 through 8. When they arrive, basically what happens is that Samuel arrives and calls in all the brothers, right? Because David has a bunch of brothers. So calls in all of Jesse's sons, and they all come in. This is where you pick up in verse 6. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord," right? Because Eliab is a stud. Like, that's what we have to understand. Like, if you're thinking king material, this is the guy that comes to mind. He's the oldest, he's strong, he's confident. Like, this is just the guy. And Samuel's like, "Man, this was super easy. Like, this gotta be the guy right here." Verse 7, "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things that people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart.'" Verse 8, "Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel." That's like brother number 2. But Samuel said, "The Lord hasn't chosen this one either." So, just to save us some time, what we're going to find out is that the Bible tells us that God led Samuel to David's home. And as Samuel walks into his house, his eyes are immediately drawn to the older brother. And he's like, "Man, like, this is the easiest gig I've ever had. Like, this is the guy. I can get back and do my thing. Like, let's just anoint him and be on our way." But we find out that God says, "No, not him." And so we read that Samuel goes through every single one of David's brothers. And not one of them has God chosen to be king of Israel. And so I feel like in this moment that God had to kind of nudge Samuel a little bit, like in his heart and his spirit, to be like, let me help you out, Samuel. Like, don't get this all twisted, because what you have to know, Samuel, is that I'm not looking at what you can see. Samuel, I'm looking deeper. I'm looking underneath it all. I'm looking at the heart. And church, what I want us all to understand today is that God is looking for something like that when it came to the new king of his people. He's looking for a man after God's own heart, someone who actually cares about the same things that God cared about. Not someone who just looked the part. Not someone who just felt right, who looked like king material, but someone who is truly about surrendering their hearts to God. See, I think that most of us, we kind of default and we assume and we think that the people who are going to affect the world, the people who are going to go out there and make a difference and be the true heroes, they're going to be the most talented. They're going to be the ones with all this charisma, all this success. They're going to be the best looking. They're going to have it all together. They're going to simply look the part. Yet what God is saying right here in this moment to this old prophet Samuel, as all of these brothers are passing before him and they're dropping like flies. What God is saying here is that the only credentials that God, for people that he chooses to use are humble and willing. The only credentials for people that God chooses to use are humble and willing. So ask yourself this question, like, what are you striving to be? And what I mean by that is, are you so caught up in this race to be the best, The race to be the most successful, to be the most popular, to be the highest paid, to be the best looking, to be the most athletic, to be whatever you want to fill in the blank with. Now, church, don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong, because I understand this desire to want to be the best. And I believe that that is something that God puts in every single one of us. This desire to excel and to have excellence and to be the best. I mean, we should strive to honor God in all we do, everything. But the question is, at what expense? I mean, are you caught up in this race to be the best, whatever it is that you want to be the best at? Are you so focused on that? Or are you simply pursuing your relationship with God and His purpose for your life and just allowing everything else to fall into place? See, what we read is that David actually chose option number 2. We read that David chose the second option. He chose to pursue God. He chose to pursue God's purpose. And we see how David had this incredible opportunity to literally change an entire nation. Back to the story, right? We're in the house. All the brothers pass through, and it's none of them. So now they're all just like hanging out, waiting, like, well, now what do we do, right? And so Samuel, he's gone through all the brothers. None of them are chosen to be king of Israel. And so naturally, Samuel's now probably a little bit frustrated. Like, what in the world did I come here for? Like, this is the right house, right? Like, you're Jesse, I'm in Bethlehem. Like, can we, like, cross our T's and dot our I's here? Like, is this really what I'm supposed to be? And so as he's getting ready to leave, I imagine him picking up all of his stuff. Like, he has this, like, one moment where he's like, Jesse, like, is this all you have? Like, are you telling me there's no other brothers? There is no more. Church, listen to how Jesse responds in 1 Samuel 16:11. So he asks Jesse, are these all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse answered. He is tending the sheep. Side note, not even Jesse, David's dad, thought David mattered. Back in verse 11. Samuel says, send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives. I mean, so Jesse says, no, don't go. I guess you don't have to go yet. Like, I do have one more son, but he's just out watching my sheep. I mean, I guess you can talk to him for a minute if you want to. Kind of save you some time. And so this messenger, he's sent out into the fields to go and grab David and to bring him back. Again, church, this is a tense moment. I mean, just put yourself in this position. It's kind of a little awkward because you have David's brothers and his father and Samuel. They're all standing in this small, crowded room just waiting. Think of an elevator. Like, are you allowed to talk? Should you talk? What should you say? Like, that's just how it was. No one knew what to say. Then all of a sudden, they start hearing footsteps coming towards the house. I mean, now that begs the question, like, would this be the next king of Israel? I mean, this is the youngest of all the brothers. I mean, this is the one who watched sheep. This is literally the most far-fetched guy of them all. So the door creaks open. And David, I'm assuming, dirty and smelly, steps into this crowded room. And we read that Samuel, this old prophet, hobbles over to David, takes his horn of oil, his flask of oil, and he pours it down David's head. The oil is running down his face. And take a look at this. It's from the Message translation, so it's a little bit different than what you're reading, but this is what goes down right here in this moment. Verse 13, Samuel took his flask of oil and anointed him, David, with his brothers standing around watching. The Spirit of God entered David like a rush of wind, God empowering him for the rest of his life. So in this moment, Samuel bends down to whisper into David's ear. And David hears those famous words. David, you will be the next king of Israel. Spread the news, call everybody, like, are you kidding me? Dinner's on me tonight, guys. Brothers, I got this. Like Samuel, kings make good money, right? Like, I'm gonna have to give my selfie, like Snapchat story right here, Samuel. This is huge. Church, that's exactly what I would have done. I mean, can you imagine that? But that's not what David did. I mean, for me, maybe that's why I'm not king of Israel, right? I would have made an enormous deal about my, huge promotion to be named the new king of Israel. But let's fast forward a little bit, just a smidge, in David's life. And then we'll come back to this moment. We're still in 1 Samuel 16, but we're going to go to verse 19, which is some time later. Verse 19 says this. Then Saul, who's the king at that time, Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me your son David, who is with the sheep. Okay, hold on a second. Context. This was after. Church, this is after David was anointed king of Israel. I mean, the Bible actually tells us that right after David was anointed king, his hair fresh with oil, we read that he went back out to the fields to watch his father's sheep. Now I imagine if you're wearing a wool sweater back then because David made that for you and you have that good enough relationship, like you look at David and you're like, David, maybe you don't understand what just went down over here. Like, David, did you forget that you're going to be king? Did you forget that, this is a huge deal, David? Take some stinking credit. You've been watching these nasty sheep, help them off their backs since you were a kid. And now you've just been anointed as the heir to the throne. Get a hold of yourself. Snap out of it. But church, what we read is that David was not concerned with his appearance, his status, or quite honestly how he came off to anyone. David was more concerned with God's purpose in his life for that specific time. And since David was anointed as the next king of Israel, David knew that right now, right then, right now, his purpose was to be a sheep watcher for his father. So church, it was back to the fields, back to the training ground for the freshly anointed King David. See, church, as insignificant as watching sheep was, David remained faithful to it. As low as it seemed, David remained faithful to it. And church, maybe you're here today, and maybe you think that the time that you spend, whatever time it looks like, you're trying to read the Bible, you're trying to understand it, you're trying to pray, and it may seem insignificant. Or maybe for you in your season of life, you're just trying to wrangle your kids as a stay-at-home parent. Maybe students, you're just trying to pass that class. Maybe you're just trying to make ends meet to keep the lights on or food on the table while you're working what you would call a dead-end job. Or maybe you're trying to make a difference in the life of someone who just isn't getting it. Church, I know that it may seem daunting. I know that it may appear thankless, whether it's a small chunk of your day or whether it consumes your every moment. The reality of it is that God is watching you and He's watching your life. He's watching to see if you have the integrity when no one else is around, when no one else is looking, when it's just you. He's checking to see, and He's focusing on your heart to see if you're truly willing, if you're truly humble, or if you're just putting on a show and maybe you're too consumed with your appearance or your reputation. Again, David was an absolute nobody. Church, he was a nobody. And chances are, in some way, shape, or form, you can identify with that. Maybe there are days, there are seasons where you just feel invisible. You feel overlooked. You feel as if no one sees you, as if you just blend into the background. It's everyone else has the talent. They all have the clout. They all have the opportunity. They're the impressive ones. But you, me, come on, I'm just average at best. Church, if that's you this morning, if you feel like that, then listen to this. You are the perfect candidate for God to use to change the world. Church, He's not looking for the obvious choice. He's looking for you. Believe that today. I mean, while everyone else in the world is simply looking at what's on the surface, the badges, the accomplishments, the merit, which I get, yes, that has its importance. God is watching what's going on underneath all of that. So, church, my question for you this morning is, what does God see? What does God see when He takes a look at your heart? I mean, because again, we have David who went from watching sheep in his father's field to becoming the next king of Israel. Literally chosen by God Himself because David cared about the exact same things that God cared about. Because David was faithful in the small everyday things that most of the time, most of us, you and I, we just simply overlook. So what happened to David? I mean, did he become king? Kill a giant here and there and play a harp and sit on the throne? Live happily ever after? No! Church, not even close. What you may or may not know about David is that God used David to literally change the course of history. And as you'll see from this moment where we just left off, with David in the field herding sheep, that his story was just beginning. And church, I'm going to be ever so bold to say I believe that your story is just beginning too. Church, the best is yet to come. Today, my hope and my desire, well, first of all, like I said, I don't know what season you find yourself in. I don't know what your circumstances are. I don't know what your experiences look like. I don't know your frustrations. I don't know your wins. I don't know what this season looks like for you, but I hope that you know, I hope that you believe that you are receiving your calling to be the one that God uses to impact your world, to change your community, to rock your household. Whatever that might look like. Church, once again today, I hope that you know that you now have the permission to believe, to know, to understand that it's you. He's calling you. So in whatever the situation, in whatever the circumstance, in whatever your current reality looks like, I would just leave you with this. Church, be faithful. Be faithful in the routine. Because sometimes, it's just not what it seems. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, God, we thank you for this truth. God, we thank you right here and right now for whatever situation, whatever circumstance we find ourselves in. God, because we know that we can believe what you say in your word. And that you have called every single one of us to do something. But God, it all starts in our hearts. So today, God, as we just long for adventure, as we long to be crusaders, as we long for a revolution, God, would you remind us that the greatest cause for us right now simply starts with ourselves. God, you've called us to adventure. You've called us to a life where waves will be made. But God, don't let us overlook the routine. God, we give you our hearts. We give you our worship. God, we give you it all. Because you are deserving of every last bit of it and more. God, so hear me pray.